Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is some programs at the National Science Foundation in the office where I work. So I guess I'll get started. So just to give you sort of a somewhat bigger picture, so for those of you who don't sort of understand how the National Science Foundation works, so we're the Office of Advanced Cyberinfrastructure. It's an office, not a division, but it's part of the Directorate for Computer and Information Science and Engineering. There are 3 other divisions. And the point of this office is to foster cyber infrastructure ecosystem, right? You see the quote there, and this gives you an idea of how big the programs are, right? So that's for FY18, so that's not this, well, this current year. This is for last year. We're talking about on the order of $224 million, a fairly significant project. That doesn't include Frontera, right? That would make that a much bigger number. Because that was this year, not last year. And the office processes on the order of, well, that year, 950 proposals, of which 305 were awarded. That's a significantly higher success rate than most of the other divisions within CISE. So that's a good thing, right? And then there's a little bit more about sort of pointers to things there. So what kinds of things does the office fund, right? So it's resources, so that includes things like Frontera and the new system Bridges 2 at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center and the new system Expanse at the San Diego Supercomputing Center. Those were recently announced, those are in process, and a bunch of other systems that already are in place. Data infrastructure, science gateways, there's a couple of institutes, there's pilots, test beds, there's it funds Exceed. So all the computing resources that a lot of people use across universities in the US. And then there's the software and data systems. I talked about data infrastructure, software systems. So the program that Robert Harrison talked about this morning, that they recently got funding from, that CSSI program, is led by the Office of Advanced Cyberinfrastructure. That's for doing software and data development work. And then, of course, people. I'm going to talk a lot about people and organizations and communities. Cloud services. There's also instrumentation. So there's a whole bunch of different things that are of interest to the office. So let me talk now about learning and workforce development, the types of programs. That's what I was going to focus on here. And I know there's not too many professors, too many faculty here, but it's also relevant to cyber infrastructure professionals, as you'll see. The communities of concern include people doing science, right? Science and engineering to develop new capabilities, okay? So that's sort of traditional doing research, right? But there's also areas, there's also domain scientists, right? So there's people developing cyber infrastructure, there's people developing domain science, okay? And working with people doing cyber infrastructure. And then there's the professionals, okay? So like I said, so we fund research and systems. Obviously, those need to be staffed, user development, all that, right? So that's all funded through programs within learning and workforce development. So let me talk about some of the programs. So we fund, and I'm the responsible program officer for REU sites. Okay, so that's research experience for undergraduates who don't know. So that's funding research for either the summer or during semesters. There are these programs at lots of different sites for different types of research programs at universities. There's for faculty early career research programs. So there's the career and the CRII Research Initiation Initiative awards. I'll talk more about those. That's for early career researchers. Not just tenure track faculty, but also research scientists are eligible for those now. And then there's a relatively new program on training and workforce development. This is developing skills for people to teach how to use HPC and other cyber infrastructure resources. That's the Cybertraining. That's the number, the solicitation. And that's the Cybertraining program. I'll definitely talk more about that. And then there is a relatively new program. OAC traditionally did not have a core research program like the other divisions within CISE. Okay, that's for core scientific research. And people didn't think for a long time that what does it mean for doing research in cyber infrastructure? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about what that means, okay? And This year, the new solicitation, the deadlines are in the fall, and OAC is only doing the small ones, not the deadline is in November. And it's a common solicitation across all the CISE divisions now. That's the new solicitation with specific program-specific stuff for each one. There's a program-specific page for each of the divisions that describes what kinds of research, and that's actually the best place to learn about what kinds of research can be proposed both to the core research program, but also to things like if you're trying to decide where to send a career or a CRII proposal, which division. Those pages will tell you a lot about what kinds of things, what kinds of research are supported by each of the divisions. So let me talk a little bit more about the core research program. So we're talking about research cyber infrastructure research. What does that mean? That's the future capabilities of research cyber infrastructure, okay? This is all targeted at research. That's what NSF funds, right? So it's knowledge, design, development, and utilization of robust research cyber infrastructure and the career paths of cyber scientists and engineers. And that means computer scientists, okay, there are computer scientists, that's what I am, but also computational and data scientists, data-driven science and engineering. And again, all in service of looking at cyber infrastructure issues, okay? So what kinds of research? What distinguishes OAC from the other divisions in CISE and from the other directorates is that we're talking about mainly what a lot of people call translational research. That came, I think, from the biomedical domain originally, but we're talking about design, development, deployment, experimentation, application of advanced research cyber infrastructure, right? So that means from design to practice. So that means it's okay to talk about actually transitioning to practice. It's not just about the core research and what could happen 20 years from now, okay? So other characteristics, and when I say optional there, what it means is typically most projects have one or more of these characteristics, not all of them. They can be multidisciplinary, they can be extreme scale, so we're talking about large scale systems, driven by science and engineering research, end-to-end solutions, and or deployable as robust research cyber infrastructure, right? Those are typically the kinds of research that we're talking about. To be a little bit more specific about the research areas, we see proposals that talk about architectures and middlewares for extreme scale systems, right? Design, benchmarking, this is sort of all the kinds of things that people talk about here, right? MVA, PICH, that's research infrastructure, right? For people to build their applications, build and run their applications. Scalable algorithms and applications, so we fund also research in numerical and high performance scientific computing methods, that can be used across a wide range of application areas, data, software visualization, modeling and simulation, so all those kinds of things. And then things, it's all categorized under this idea of advanced cyber infrastructure, the ecosystem, programming languages, libraries and environments, tools, and there's also some of these socio-technical aspects. There are proposals that have sort of a social and behavioral sciences aspects to it in terms of including user studies and things like that. So that is actually legitimate research for OAC. Not a large set of, but there are people doing that kind of thing in OAC-funded projects. So that's the core program. Then there's the career program, which is the full name is Faculty Early Career Development Program. When we say faculty there, it's not just tenure track faculty, it's also research faculty. Okay, so there we're focusing on junior faculty as teachers and scholars, both. Okay, so we're looking at outstanding research, education, and integrating the two. So right, good career proposals talk about a research program over 5 years and an education program over 5 years and how those are integrated. Right, that's what good career proposals look at. And then there's this sort of Presidential Early Career Awards. Those are actually not that's an award, that's a sort of a on top of a career award. There's not extra money associated with it. It's just a sort of prestigious thing. That's across all the federal agencies, not just NSF. There's about 20 of those that are recommended across all of NSF each year. They weren't awarded for a couple of years at the beginning of the new administration. There was just a new set announced of about 60 or more than 60, of which 4 came from OAC. That's not bad because the career program at OAC is only a few years old. Okay, and then looking at the size of the program, we're talking about, I can't talk about the details of how many were proposed, but the number of submissions has been increasing a fair amount each year for the career. We have over 30 active awards, and The deadline for that was this past July. So anybody who's thinking about it, now you have to wait till next July. It comes around once a year across all of NSF, okay? And each of the directorates sometimes has a different deadline. They're slightly different. They stagger them because literally hundreds of proposals come into NSF for that, even into CISE, well over 100, a few hundred. And now a relatively recent thing is it's open to non-tenure track faculty, and then you can have collaborators, other senior personnel. It didn't used to be allowed, so that's allowed now. The minimum for those is over 5 years is 400K. That would be a very small one for OAC, typically in the 500 to 600K range over 5 years for a single investigator typically, so that's not bad. And then we do have proposals that span multiple divisions. That's okay. If your research spans multiple divisions, that's okay. You can have a primary or secondary interest. You can actually select more than one division to make it get reviewed properly by the right set of people. That's the important thing, is to pick the right place. Okay, there's a program page there, and we do have, because these are typically newer PIs, there are these proposal writing workshops which are really useful for people who are relatively new at the game. They have those once a year, a few months before the deadline. Okay, and those are really useful. Those are typically at NSF. Okay, so this is just an example of the kinds of things. This is one of the recent awardees from about 2 or 3 years ago, what kinds of things that she does. That was supplied by the PI in terms of what the project is, but you can see it has both a research and an education component to it, right? And then here's another example of another PI doing something completely different, right? This is rather different from the previous one. He's also, that one, you can tell from the award number, that was awarded in 2015, right, for the proposal number. And he received a PCASE award. I just met him actually at NSF about a month ago. So, but he also just moved got a promotion and all that, and moved from George Washington in DC to Clarkson University in upstate New York. Don't ask me why, okay? That's an interesting choice, but that's a small liberal arts school in upstate New York. So probably because of the promotion, I would guess. But so that's another example. The other program this is for a really early career scientists, is called the CRII, Research Initiation Initiative. This is also a relatively new program in CISE, in the directorate. And this is for faculty or research scientists in their first 3 years. This is before, and you can't have already received a career. Okay, so you have to be in your first 3 years since you started as an assistant professor or an equivalent assistant research scientist. You need a chair letter, you need all these things. Same research focus as for the core programs and for the career. And these are small awards, 2 years and up to, typically it supports some of the PI and our graduate student for or 1 or 2 graduate students for 2 years. If they're in a research position, yes, absolutely. Okay, so this doesn't have an educational role typically. This is research. This is typically, like I said, to fund an RA or an RA or 2 for a couple of years to get started. And the deadline, sadly, you just missed it, was what's that, a week ago? Okay. So, but again, this is an ongoing program. It'll happen again next year. Again, so part of this is not just for you, but to go back and talk with your colleagues about opportunities, right? So hopefully, you'll go back to your own institutions and talk to people about this. So this, I'm not going to go into details about this, but this is really to get started, because this is you're not eligible if you've already been a PI on any grant, any federal grant.
Is it just a PI or a co-PI?
PI. Yeah. If you're a co-PI, that's okay, but not a PI. Okay, So let me talk a little bit more about this. This is also a newer program, and this one is unique within CISE and actually across NSF. There were no training programs for doing research and outreach and training within CISE, or actually, because even the Education and Human Resources Directorate does research on education, not training. Okay, so this program, Cybertraining, has two goals. One is to broaden adoption of tools and methods, and curriculum and instructional materials development integration. That's across computer science and also domain sciences, okay, not just computer science. And there are three types of projects, basically from small to medium to potentially larger. We haven't funded, these are conceptualization grants for bigger projects like institute level things, but there's no institutes yet. Right, these are planning, and this and the mediums were new for this year, for 2019. The awards on these have been recently announced for this year, and it targets all three communities that I described earlier. So CI professionals, cyber infrastructure professionals, contributors, and users, right, for training, okay, training and education. All the directorates are participating with OAC as the lead. And there's been actually it's only been, I guess the first year was 2016, fiscal year 16, so that would have been in spring of 2017. And so there have been now 3 rounds, and the number of submissions has increased. It's actually turned into a fairly large program. The previous deadline was in February. The new solicitation isn't out yet, but you can expect that there will be a deadline in a similar time frame for the coming year. Okay, so I think, yeah. So that program is really about training, right? Training and then curriculum development. Those projects are also outreach. So, for example, one of the projects was actually one that I participated in, was for actually helping teachers incorporate parallel distributed computing into early courses. So we're training teachers at smaller places that don't have the resources for those kinds of things. Okay.
Broadly, would the following fit in this topic? Suppose there is a popular tool which is used by the scientific community. So how to ensure that newer graduate students are skilled, or let's say train them to use that tool? So would this kind of topic fit in?
It depends how narrow. Okay. Right? I mean, if it's a really small community, that might be a hard sell. But if it's a reasonably sized community, you're going to have impact, because that's a question of broader impact. So these proposals have the same criteria for evaluation by reviewers as any other NSF proposal, which is intellectual merit and broader impact. And so you have to make an argument both that there's something interesting going on in terms of what you're doing, that's the intellectual merit, and that you're going to have an impact, and how big that impact is. Okay, so if it's a tool that's widely used and you're going to do training, that definitely falls within the, and you can look at when the solicitation comes out, you can look at the solicitation and it talks more about the details. Okay? So just to give, to sort of finish up, there are other opportunities for funding within OAC that have learning and workforce development implications. There are these for if you have graduate students that are going out into industry potentially to spend a semester, there's funding for that. There's a Dear Colleague letter that describes that. That's at 17-091. That can be up to $50,000 per student. There are EAGRs, which are small awards that can be done without full review. We fund workshops, we fund research coordination nodes. So this is all for all sorts of things. We fund student travel grants. You guys know about that. And so that talks about, for all these kinds of things, you have to talk to a program officer, work with a program officer to make sure that it's something that the office is willing to fund. Okay, yeah, basically those are, you have to talk and then send in a proposal. And then I would really suggest everybody subscribe to the mailing list. There's a periodic mailings go out about the programs, deadlines, upcoming deadlines, new things that are going on in the office. So that'll be in my slides. So when they get posted. So with that, I'll stop.
Let's thank speaker.